for the White House on WION. World is One.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is One.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. A jet linked to the Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin flies from Russia to Belarus. Mercenary leader moves to Belarus after a deal with the Kremlin that ended the Wagner mutiny. Over a dozen people dead and many injured after heavy rains lashed Pakistan's Punjab province. Officials say the deaths were due to lightning strikes and collapsed roofs. The schedule for the ICC Men's ODI World Cup in India is released. However, Pakistan's participation in the marquee event is still not confirmed, with the PCB stating it would require government clearance to travel to India. The United States may become the first country in the world to provide universal internet access to its citizens. expected to spend $42 billion to achieve the feat by 2030. Millions of Muslim pilgrims crowd Saudi Arabia's Mount Arafat on the last day of Hajj. This is the first full-scale gathering of Hajj in Mecca post-COVID. The controversial migrant issue in the UK has entered a crucial point. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has released the cost of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. The UK government has estimated that the cost of sending one person could be as high as $215,000. According to the UK government, the cost of deporting each individual to Rwanda would include over $130,000 payments to Rwanda for hosting each asylum seeker, around $28,000 for the flight and escorting, and $22,900 for processing and legal costs. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, claims the UK government would save at least $135,000 for every person deterred from entering the UK by irregular means. Braverman says that unless action is taken, the cost of housing asylum seekers will rise to around $14 billion a year, which currently stands somewhere near $4.5 billion. Controlling the arrival of illegal migrants on small boats into the UK is one of the 5 priorities of UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. For weeks, Sunak and Braverman have been under heavy pressure by senior Tory backbenchers to come up with a tentative plan, as the Conservative Party is already behind the main opposition Labour Party in opinion polls. And all of this ahead of a potential national election due next year. The opposition parties believe this is a non-workable plan. The Labour Party says the economic assessment is a complete joke, and it failed to accurately predict what the overall cost of the plan would be. On the other hand, the Scottish National Party accused the government of spending an astronomical amount of money. The SNP also criticised the government for deporting desperate people, while failing to help people in Britain with the rising costs of mortgages and food bills. Meanwhile, a new report published by the Women and Equalities Committee on Equality and the UK asylum process urges the government to rule out any intention to detain or forcibly remove asylum-seeking children to Rwanda. The committee has also called for an urgent review of safeguards for vulnerable people in all types of asylum accommodation. Meanwhile, the Court of Appeal will be handing down its judgment on whether the Rwanda flights are lawful. The row over lockdown parties has now reached the doorstep of another former resident of number 10 Downing Street. Theresa May is under heavy Tory pressure to explain her alleged involvement in a socially distanced party. The former UK Prime Minister was photographed at an event that was held on November 24th, 2020. The event was organised to celebrate the 15th anniversary of a Tory pressure group known as Women to Win. According to a report by Guido Fawkes, May participated in the discussion in person at the headquarters of the think tank. The report also stated the panel discussion was followed by celebratory drinks. Reports suggest that May left the event before there were any drinks. Though nowhere in the original article is there a mention that Theresa May broke any rules. But the Labour Party and some Tory backbenchers are now demanding an official explanation from the former PM, as during that time most of Britain was under COVID lockdown, and there were a number of limited exemptions relating to work. This comes after a Parliament Privileges Committee accused the former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson of deliberately misleading Parliament. The committee concluded that Johnson acted despite prior knowledge of COVID rules. He was aware that the parties were a breach of the rules. Theresa May herself acknowledged the report. She said every lawmaker is responsible for their own actions. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Alex Isaac joins us live from London. Alex, we've seen Partygate take down one former British Prime Minister and now another one's in the headlines. Just how damaging is this potentially for Theresa May?
Well, a lot of people have come out backing Theresa May already, I have to say. They are saying that she is a very stringent character, and actually those photos that have been going around on Guido Fawkes that you mentioned don't actually show her under 2 metres. The difference here is whether it was a drinks party or a work event, because when those pictures were taken, there was no ability to have that social distancing parties or drinks that we then ended up having here in the UK. At that time, she was saying it was a work event. There was pictures all over social media. There was actually a press photographer that sent out a lot of those pictures. So it could well be a lot of puff without any heat. But of course, the opposition party are going to run with it, especially because of the situation with Boris Johnson and the fact that Partygate and the inquiry has just concluded. Now, what we are going to be seeing, though, is what I'm hearing is that there are a lot more of these types of events to be coming out, whether it's via the Conservatives or Labour or any others of those that are in the House of Commons. There does feel that there is a lot of those that had broken the rules at the time when they were the ones implementing the rules. But generally, the UK public is having a bit of fatigue about all of these COVID party lockdowns. When we were speaking about Boris Johnson and the inquiry that came out, a lot of people were suggesting, it's time to get over this and move forward. We have a lot more problems within the UK rather than looking back and seeing what occurred during Partygate and all that time surrounding it. A lot of people want to be able to fix the problems and concerns that we have right now, which is the cost of living crisis, which is still rumbling on, and everything is continuing to rise in costs. Those 5 priorities you mentioned in your first story there that Rishi Sunak had promised with the immigration, with the NHS, those are the things that the UK public want to be hearing about, want to see moving forward, not just going back and picking on other MPs and former prime ministers about whether or not they had socially distancing parties. I think there is this general consensus against the UK public that it's expected, sadly, from our government that they aren't going to follow the rules that they enforce on everybody else.
And Alex, you mentioned fatigue there, but of course we have a general election looming in the background now, likely to be taking place next year. The polls have Labour leading the Tories by quite a significant margin. Do you think that these continuingly damaging allegations of parties are contributing to those negative poll numbers for the Tories?
Oh, absolutely. I think, though, you have to remember that the Conservative Party has been in power for over a decade now, and there is a lot of problems that have come through for the last couple of years, not just the fact that we had the mini budget from Liz Truss, which technically did a real damage to our market, and of course then we had Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak all in one time. So the Labour Party doesn't really need to be pushing this alternative. I think that many people were already looking to see what the Conservatives have been doing over the past years and not necessarily liking what they're seeing, and that's why the polls are showing that there is an increase for other parties. But it's not just the opposition Labour which is getting the increase in polls. Lib Dems and the Greens Party as well, they are actually getting a boost. So it looks like people aren't just wanting the 2-horse race that we've been seeing for many a year. They're actually looking to see how can others help them, and maybe it isn't just about the Conservatives versus Labour, but we are going to be seeing a lot more tit for tat as we are going through until that election next year, because it does feel right now that there are a lot of problems Rishi Sunak had to face, especially he hasn't been in power that long, but also there's been the COVID, there's been Brexit that's still rumbling on. There is trade deals that he has to deal with, plus those 5 priorities that I said. All of those things are weighing heavily on him, and there doesn't seem to be a fixable solution for any of them, especially that he said that he was going to do a lot of these changes before December, and we're not seeing any movement now, and we're nearly 6 months into the year. So you can see just from that why Conservatives themselves say the polls are going down, and the party does need to come and stick together. We're also seeing that the party itself seems to be falling apart. They're always up for backstabbing and putting things forward. So it does seem like they aren't really strong enough themselves to even ride this wave.
Alex Isaac, our correspondent in London there, many thanks. The England and Wales Cricket Board has apologised unreservedly to those who face discrimination in the game. This after a damning report by the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket found that racism, sexism and classism are widespread and deep-rooted across the sport. The panel was set up after the 2020 Azim Rafiq racism scandal, in which the former Yorkshire player alleged harassment and had labelled English cricket institutionally racist. The ICEC came into existence in 2021 in the wake of that scandal, along with global movements such as Black Lives Matter and Me Too. The purpose of the Commission was to look into allegations of discrimination and to boost equality, diversity and inclusion in the game. The 317-page report, titled Holding Up a Mirror to Cricket, featured evidence from more than 400 people, including players, coaches and fans. It's made 44 recommendations, but here are the 6 key takeaways. Structural and institutional racism continues to exist within the game. Women are treated as subordinate to men at all levels. There's a prevalence of elitism and class-based discrimination. Cricket has failed black communities and ECB must develop a plan to revive it. Many did not report incidents of racism due to a lack of trust in the authorities. An overhaul of women's pay structure to ensure equal pay at the international level by 2030. China's spy balloon programme is back in the news, with reports now claiming such balloons have previously been spotted over Asia as well. This is according to the BBC Panorama programme. The British media reported new evidence of China's spy balloons, including flights over Japan and Taiwan, months after the US-China relations were derailed when one such airship was shot down off the US coast. Working with Synthetech, an artificial intelligence company which sifted through huge amounts of data captured by satellites, the BBC has found multiple images of balloons crossing East Asia. The company's founder, Corey Jakolski, found evidence of one balloon crossing northern Japan in early September 2021. He also believes the evidence points to the balloon having been launched from deep inside China. This is concerning because Japan is a major security ally of the US and more American military personnel are stationed there than in any other country. And as reported by the media house, Japan will now take all precautions to keep the Chinese balloon threat at bay. And the report comes as US-China relations were thrown into turmoil in February this year, when a Chinese spy balloon said to be the size of 3 buses was shot down by the American fighter jets over the Atlantic Ocean. The US State Department believes the Chinese balloons are equipped to gather signals intelligence. It says the aircraft it discovered over the US had multiple antennas likely capable of collecting and geolocating communications. The incident led to US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to postpone his visit to China in early February, although he finally visited Beijing last week in a bid to ease tense bilateral ties. Meanwhile, China has repeatedly aimed the balloons seen over the US airspace and said that they were civilian airships used for scientific research and that it was unintended and an isolated event. Moreover, Beijing has been accused of using balloons to gather intelligence data from key military posts and nuclear sites in enemy nations. After 40 long years, an infamous plane dubbed as the plane for death flights returns to Argentina. This plane was used during the military dictatorial rule between 1976 and 1983 to execute dissenters of the regime. Argentine officials have welcomed the return of the airplane. Vice President Cristina Fernandez said the plane stands as a memorial to the ideals of democracy. This plane will now be a part of a museum dedicated to the victims' memory. It is said that the national reorganisation process dictatorship threw political opponents to their deaths from this very plane. The ceremony presenting the airplane was also attended by Sergio Massa, the economy minister, who led international efforts to recover the aircraft.
En la condición humana de esas mujeres, de esas religiosas, que son también los mismos valores de los militantes políticos, porque, a ver, acá no estamos recordando a santos ni ángeles, que están en el cielo, no en la tierra. Acá estamos recordando a militantes políticos que los desaparecieron por las ideas que tenían. Esto que quede claro.
At the request of relatives of the victims, Argentina's economy minister brought the plane from the United States and organised its transfer.
En este mundo que trata de negar lo que sucedió, que trata de negar los regímenes totalitarios, es peligroso porque si lo niegan es porque piensan en algún momento que esto puede volver a pasar. Y nosotros estamos construyendo memoria, estamos construyendo verdad, estamos construyendo justicia, porque en la medida en que haya justicia para estos crímenes es la garantía de que no vuelva a ocurrir.
Fue tremendo ver el avión, ¿no? Por un lado, el logro de haberlo traído después de estar 4 años junto a Mabel tratando de que lo compren, y por otro lado pensar que fue el último lugar donde mi mamá estuvo con vida, así que bueno, es tremendo pensar que una madre que solamente buscaba a su hijo la hayan tirado viva desde este avión al mar.
The plane, which is a Skyvan PA-51, was identified in 2010 by using flight logs. This was done by journalist and survivor of the dictatorship, Miriam Lewin, and the Italian photographer Giancarlo Serolda. The discovery provided evidence which was used in a historic trial to convict dozens of dictatorship-era criminals. Several reports by rights groups suggest about 30,000 people disappeared during the dictatorship between 1976 and 1983. Can you imagine a world without batteries? Well, the man who gave lithium-ion batteries to the world's oldest Nobel Prize winner, John Bannister Goodenough, died on Sunday at the age of 100. He is a tribute to the scientist's legacy. Nobel laureate John Goodenough played a crucial role in developing the lithium-ion batteries. He won the 2019 Nobel Prize for Chemistry, sharing it with Stan Whittingham. Goodenough was also behind the development of random access memory, or RAM, for computers. In 2013, he was awarded the National Medal of Science. The centenarian was born in Germany in 1922 to American parents and served in the US Army as a meteorologist. He earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Yale University, as well as a PhD in physics from the University of Chicago. What makes Goodenough's achievements particularly intriguing, though, is his battle with dyslexia in school, which made him very difficult to understand lessons or keep up in the chapel. He had been a professor at the University of Texas, which described him as a dedicated public servant, a sought-after mentor, and a brilliant yet humble inventor. His students speak highly of his kindness, integrity, and sense of humour, and recall that above all, his doors were always open to anybody for discussion, suggestion, and help. The Holy Hajj period is nearing its end. Hundreds and thousands of Muslims have gathered at the Mount Arafat under sweltering sun as they observe the most crucial day of the pilgrimage, the Arafah. The intense day of worship, considered to be the climax of the annual Hajj, Mount Arafat is located about 20 kilometres from Mecca, and it's a site where Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon, calling for equality and unity among Muslims. Muslims believe praying on this specific day atop Mount Arafat is their best chance at salvation and spiritual renewal. According to Saudi Arabia authorities, more than 1.6 million pilgrims arrived on Sunday itself. Precautionary measures like green barriers have been set outside the mosque to direct the crowds and prevent stampedes, which have killed hundreds of believers in the past. As rising prices and economic breakdown plagued many of the attending believers, some shared pure happiness over finally being able to undertake the spiritual journey.
Even if I had to sell everything to come to Hajj, I would have done it. If I didn't own anything and I could come, I would have come. I have been trying for 3 years already, and it doesn't happen every time. So the first time I got it, even if I paid everything I own, I would do it just to be able to come.
This will be the first time since COVID that Hajj is taking place without any restrictions. An estimated 2.5 million people are expected to attend the week-long Hajj pilgrimage this year, making it the largest ever Hajj gathering. Among the pilgrims are believers from economically suffering regions like Palestine and Pakistan.
Even with the deteriorating economic situation, for the sake of the Holy Mosque, seeing the Kaaba, saluting the Prophet and standing on the pure Arafat mountain, everything is worth it. But the economic conditions are really tough. I ask for a fourth option of a hotel that is further away from the Kaaba, which could be half the price, but the prices and the choices that have been given are embarrassing, to be honest.
According to reports, at least 1,000 Palestinians will receive sponsorship for their Hajj trip. For over a decade now, King Salman has allocated funds to grant free Hajj to 1,000 Palestinians impacted by the conflict with Israel. Hajj is considered to be the most significant manifestation of Islamic faith and unity. Undertaking the Hajj at least once is considered a duty for physically and financially sound Muslims. Are you a Beatles fan? If yes, and I certainly am, there's some good news for all of you. An exhibition of unseen photos from Paul McCartney's archive will begin on June 28th at the National Portrait Gallery in London. Titled Paul McCartney Photographs 1963 to 64, Eyes of the Storm, the exhibit is all about the portraits captured by the Beatles singer using his own 35mm camera. A camera enthusiast, McCartney clicked a series of photos from December 63 to February 1964, which is believed to be one of the most critical phases in the evolution of the Beatles. Wondering what makes this exhibition special when there are so many photos of the band out already? Well, McCartney's portraits offer a deeply personal perspective on what it was like to be a Beatle during the formative years. Apart from self-portraits, there are also photos of John Lennon, George Harrison, Sir Ringo Starr and the manager Brian Epstein. The never-seen-before 275 photos capture the band during the peak years of Beatlemania, when the Beatles were establishing themselves as a global phenomenon. The portraits are from various cities, including Liverpool, London, Paris, New York, Washington DC and Miami. Tickets for the exhibition cost between $28 and $31 and the exhibition will go on until October 1st. Well, that's all from your WION Live Bulletin from London. I've been Oliver Regan. Many thanks for joining us.
आने वाली खुशी के लिए एक ख्याल ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है। कभी-कभी खुशी के लिए एक उदाहरण ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है।
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.